Governor Allen, a situation that has been ongoing for a number of years is our national debt. It keeps growing and growing and growing. For a while, interest rates were low for everyone, the government, a business, the citizen in his household. Well, now both are up. The deficit is up and interest rates are up. And it's my understanding that we spend several billion a year more right now just to pay the interest on the national debt than we are paying as a country for the entire Department of Defense.
That's correct.
That is a concept that needs to be delved into a little bit here to understand, because as old debt of the Treasury Department matures, it will be reissued at higher rates of interest. So it'll have to be the market conditions. So the interest figure is only going to grow, even if the deficit doesn't.
Right.
And we know the deficit's going to keep growing too. So it's not a good situation. First, your general thoughts on it. Is there any solution?
Yeah, there are solutions. And let's just for your viewers understand how awful this has gotten. The deficit spending during the pandemic, paying interest at 1%, people buying houses at really low interest rates and all that. It's all affordable. It may not be right, but it was affordable. Every time the interest rates go up 2%, 3%, 4%, that means this deficit spending that is adding to the national debt, which is now around $32 trillion, not only is a big part of the economy, but every quarter point interest rate means paying interest on that debt is worse. The priorities of a state government, in my view, are education and law enforcement, and the way you pay for it is with a vibrant economy where people are working and businesses prospering, paying taxes. Federal government, the paramount responsibility is national defense. When you look at the budget of the federal government, where the spending is, number one, spending is Social Security. Number two is Medicare. Number three is national defense. Now, Social Security and Medicare, people pay into those. But with interest rates going so high, and they're only going to get worse, we're spending more. It's nearly, let me look at this, about 15% or more of the budget is just paying interest on the debt. That's healing no one. That's providing no new armament. It is not improving anybody's education. It's doing nothing other than paying interest on the debt. And so that's going to crowd out our ability to defend ourselves. There's a concern that if ultimately this could affect seniors on Medicare or on Social Security, because you got to pay interest on your debt. If you don't pay interest on your debt, and what's going to happen is not only are interest rates going to go higher, going higher and the cost being higher, is that you can have the value of the dollar diminished, which harms things in its own way. And if the credit rating of the United States is questioned, which is happening right now, and it's happened before, in 2011, it happened. If the credit rating of the United States becomes less desirable, not a AAA bond rating, then you also have to pay an added premium or higher interest because it's not as secure. So this has to get solved. Now, here's the only way that really makes sense, that everyone understands, and that is the federal government, just like folks in their household or people in their businesses or the way that states operate, you can't spend more than you take in revenues. Every state, well, I should say 49 out of the 50 states have a constitutional amendment requiring a balanced budget in their constitution. Thomas Jefferson in the beginning said the U.S., our country, needed to have a balanced budget in our requirement in our constitution to prevent politicians from loading future generations with perpetual debt. But unfortunately, that hasn't been done. Now, I've been one who's been an advocate for a balanced budget in the federal Constitution. When I was in the House, introduced it. We didn't get, you need to get 2/3 vote and then send it to the states where 3/4 of the states have to ratify it. I'm involved in another group of folks who are using another approach, and you can call for a convention of the states to have just for a single purpose of a balanced budget. Once you get to 34 states, they actually can have a constitutional convention. The goal is to get to, we're at 27 states right now who've called for a constitutional convention for a balanced budget, just for a balanced budget at the federal level. And if you get to 33 states, Congress will probably then act because they'll be fearful of a constitutional convention. It's how the 17th Amendment actually got passed, which has the direct popular election of US senators rather than having senators decided or selected by state legislatures. And the Congress saw that the states wanted to go to that with a constitutional convention. And so Congress passed the 17th Amendment, which then went to the states, and the states overwhelmingly quickly ratified it. But the only thing that's going to stop the federal government and force them to make the tough decisions. Look, folks, it is easy to say yes to everyone who asks for more funding. It's harder to say no, but the Constitution is the only way that you can give them the backbone to say, look, we got to set priorities. We can't afford everything. We're going to say, whatever the issues or whatever the programs are, defense being number one, it'll be a priority. And you still need to look to make sure they're not wasting money there either. But the way you then pay for it is having a vibrant economy where people are working, businesses prospering, our country's more internationally competitive. We have affordable energy. Heck, you can raise revenues by using our plentiful American energy resources. You can raise revenues without raising taxes. Billions.
Well, and Governor, now this is an interesting point with it, because it would seem that step number one would be have to end a deficit before one can even think about reduction of the debt.
Oh yeah, the first thing you got to do is stop the deficit spending annually. That's number one, and it's not going to be easy. You can say, yeah, theoretically, yes, that's all fine, and it'll take some time, and they'll have to change over a period of time. But if there were a constitutional amendment being proposed, they could see it coming. It's all not going to get ratified in 1 year. It'll take several years, and you can have there's several ways of handling the details of a constitutional amendment. You could do a variety of different ways to require a balanced budget. Just look at the states, and the states have balanced budget requirements, and it would be passed very quickly by the states because the states again operate this way, and people see how dangerous this is. But the first thing you got to do is stop the bleeding. But in other words, stop the excessive spending and get spending in line with what revenues are. But again, from my point of view, the best way to raise revenues is not by having the highest taxes in the world, is by having a country that is competitively, economically competitive with the rest of the world. Some of the things that Ronald Reagan did it, President Trump did it, in reducing taxes. So the U.S. has at least taxes on incorporated businesses that are average or better than average, rather than what we did have till 2017 was the highest or second highest tax on incorporated businesses in the world. Well, that means companies are going to be going to China or Malaysia or Mexico or Brazil or some places where costs are and taxes are less. And so that needs to be done. Then the other aspect is we are so blessed with the most energy resources of any country in the world, whether it's coal, natural gas, and oil. And we have the most creative people in the world. And unfortunately, people don't seem to understand that some of these resources, so many of them with severance taxes, especially in federal lands or federal waters, you get severance taxes, and there's revenues from extracting that oil or gas or coal, And literally, you can raise hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars without raising taxes just from those severance taxes. Plus, then we have more affordable gasoline, I should say, and natural gas and electricity and food, where the input cost of agriculture, so much of that is fuels, whether it's diesel fuel or gasoline. Natural gas is the feedstock for all plastics, fertilizers, chemicals, tires, metals. All of that makes our country more competitive. And to the extent we can export, whether it's our oil, we're exporting a lot of coal, but also liquefied natural gas, especially for our European allies who were captive customers of Russia. And the only way they could get an alternative is by liquefying the natural gas and sending it over there, unless they can get some pipelines out of Libya into Italy and some of those countries. But we can help our allies, help our balance of trade. And there's no reason, it's just absurd that the United States would ever be vulnerable to Saudi Arabia, Russia, Venezuela, any of these countries, when we have the energy resources under our land and under our water. And the only thing that's missing is the political will to unleash those energy resources in America. If we do, we have more affordable fuel, more affordable food, a more safe country, and a more productive country. And it's absurd to me to listen to these whimsical views that we're going to run our economy on wind turbines and solar panels, the solar panels are fine as a supplemental, but you can't rely on something that only operates 0.25% of the time when you need that strong base load you get from whether it's nuclear or natural gas, coal, or oil for ground transportation.
Governor, I can read out of this that you're saying it's not sunny or windy every day. Is that
right? Well, yeah, half the day the sun's not up. Oh yeah, and the batteries, the storage technology mostly comes, of course, from China, and it's absurd. And solar panels have their place, but you're not going to run. Well, I think offshore wind is just absurd. The cost of it is literally billions and billions of dollars for something that operates a third of the time. Any of y'all, if you went to a car dealer and they said, "Hey, we have this new vehicle. It's a new experimental, innovative vehicle, and it will run 3 out of 7 days of the week," and you might not be driving those days that's not running. Would you buy it? Heck no. But that's what this offshore wind nonsense and boondoggles are. The solar panels work maybe a quarter of the time at best. And again, it can be supplemental. But what matters is you need base load. We need power with no sags, no surges, no blips, no interruptions. And you're only going to get that from coal or natural gas or nuclear. And if you want emissions-free energy, I think nuclear is going to have to be the approach. Nuclear is expensive. It's much more expensive than coal and natural gas. However, it is at least reliable, unlike the wind and the solar panels. And I think I know it's blasphemous, but we can learn from the French. They get about 3/4 of their power from nuclear, and they reprocess the spent fuel and vitrified and encase it in glass. And so the half-life, the radioactivity is much, much less. It's 1/10 of what it is in our country. And then there's the advances that folks are talking about on these small modular nuclear reactors, where Sam, you and I here in the Hampton Roads area, just look at the USS Ronald Reagan, other aircraft carriers and submarines are nuclear powered. Those are small modular nuclear reactors. If you hooked up the USS Ronald Reagan or the Gerald Ford or one of these carriers, you could power about 40,000 homes with just that. So if you put a bank
off of each carrier, you mentioned each individual.
Generally, if you have these modular ones like on a carrier, you're not just going to have one. You'd probably cite about half a dozen or 10 or more. of them. And again, they're more theoretically, they're much more efficient than the big. And I think we need to relicense existing nuclear power plants so long as they're operating safely. But for the next generation or advanced nuclear, I think that these small modular units have a lot of promise. I know the folks in Southwest Virginia in the coal fields, we have abandoned mines. They've been mined out mines, coal mines. They're energy literate in the coal fields, and they'd be happy to have these small modular nuclear reactors put there. And so I think that's part of the future, and it works, as opposed to something that is so unreliable and expensive as offshore wind.
The fossil fuels. I can remember you and I had a conversation right after you entered the Senate. And even then, ANWR, Alaska National Wildlife Reserve or Preserve, whichever, was bottled up in government regulations then, and that's 20 some years ago. Do we still need to pursue fossil fuels?
Yeah.
Do we need less? Well, I know your feeling on government regulation on that. I don't even have to ask that question, but how do we get to less government regulation to speed these things along, again, for the good and independence of the country? Is there a way to do that?
Yes, it's called leadership. Elections have consequences. And during the Trump administration, I'm not going to argue for one candidate or another. During the Trump administration, they finally opened up that barren slope of Alaska. And people, regardless of party in Alaska, Democrats and Republicans, are all for filling that tremendous engineering feat, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, with more oil. And so that was opened up, and then there was a change in administration, and they've now stopped it. They stopped the Keystone XL pipeline out of our friends from Alberta, Canada. It was going to bring oil from Alberta into the United States. Now we're still getting it from Alberta, but instead of a pipeline, they're having to use trucking or rail. And so trucks and rail are fine, but it's just objectively safer to be using pipelines as the safest way of transporting energy from one place to the other. And so you have folks at the federal level, as well as some states, that are against natural gas pipelines or against oil pipelines. New York has stopped any more places even hooking up to natural gas. The people in New England are getting natural gas from Qatar rather than the US because they don't want to have pipelines. And I mean, it really doesn't make much sense, but that's what's happening. And that's why I say all of these things are common sense, and they could be done, but you need to have the right leadership. And that's why the saying that elections have consequences is such a truism, because who you elect are the ones who are representing your views. And it's important for citizens to become conversant on the issues, on the candidates, become more energy literate, more historically literate, more economically literate, geographically, geologically literate. And if you have an informed populace, that's your ideal. And then electing people who reflect the views and values of the people they serve. But right now, it's policies that are against using oil, coal, natural gas, and even nuclear. And it's all favoritism from the government for wind and solar. And generally speaking, I'm for whatever is affordable and reliable, and let the marketplace decide. If people want to buy battery operated cars, fine. But it shouldn't be the government directing you to drive the type of car that the elites in government determine is best for you. I trust free people to make the best decisions for themselves, and let the marketplace decide, or let the marketplace compete for your business rather than the government telling you what to do.
Well, you've added a great deal, Governor, to, what do you say, conversancy, literacy on several points, as you say, history, geography, and so on, that you enumerated there. You've added a great deal to that today, and certainly thank you for sharing those thoughts.
Thanks for listening.